Alright everybody, so how we doing today? Just had a swig of that cherry Pepsi. Anyway, so here today from Reuters, you're going to hear something a little disturbing. So, U.S. ready to target other countries for supporting Venezuela's Maduro. From Lima, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton on Tuesday said Washington was ready to impose sanctions on any international company doing business with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. A sharp escalation of U.S. pressure on the leftist leader. Here we go, time for maximum pressure. I'm telling you, Trump's maximum pressure campaign is only going to cause more problems than it's worth. Bolton, addressing a summit of Venezuela in the Peruvian capital Lima, emphasized that together international action was needed to speed up a transition of power in the country, where more than 4 million Venezuelans have fled economic collapse. We are sending a signal to third parties that want to do business with the Maduro regime. Proceed with extreme caution, Bolton said. Yeah, actually, that message is pretty clear. That's exactly what you're sending. Except, you're going to proceed with the United States with extreme caution. If this keeps up, we're not going to be worth dealing with in the future. But his speech came a day after U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order that frees the assets of the Venezuelan government and bans any transactions with it, an act that could ensnare its dealings with Russia and China, as well as with Western companies. Bolton, one of the Trump administration's most influential hawk on Venezuela, told reporters the move forces companies around the world to choose whether to risk access to the United States and its financial system for business with Maduro. Asked by a reporter how Venezuela would respond to the executive order, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza said, "I'm going to paraphrase Donald Trump. All options are on the table." Very clever. But if there's anything we've learned from the last week, it's that sanctions, tariffs, and all forms of trade modification have far-reaching effects. Excuse me. And these far-reaching effects could also have a very negative effect on the global trade market, or just in general. Market forces are a mysterious thing sometimes. They can be really crazy. It's often best just to let them do as they will. But Trump's a Keynesian in so many ways, so what would he know? Venezuela's UN ambassador Samuel Moncada asked UN Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez and the Security Council on Tuesday to intervene. "This is an act of war by the United States," Moncada told reporters. "Venezuela is not a threat to anyone, and the United States is fabricating this aggression just to take the oil." The 15-member UN Security Council will be unable to take any action as the United States is one of the body's 5 veto powers along with Russia, China, Britain, and France. It was the first U.S. asset freeze against an entire government in the Western Hemisphere in more than 30 years. There was also a reminder that successive rounds of U.S. sanctions have so far failed to peel away the crucial support of Venezuela's military from Maduro, who took office in 2013 following the death of his political mentor, President Hugo Chavez. Now, the thing is, I believe Trump is using sanctions and his maximum pressure campaign as a method of getting the U.S. establishment what it wants without having to fight wars. He has acknowledged that wars are terrible and is trying to find a way to continue getting America what it wants and continue to being the world's bully, but without the need for express violence. Rather, instead, just modify their trade and their economy. Manipulate it. Which in and of itself could be seen as an act of war. Continuing the state control started under Chavez, Maduro has overseen one of the most economic collapses in recent world history, leaving his nation with 30 million people with severe shortages of food and medicine despite sitting on the world's largest oil reserves. In private, Bolton told Peruvian officials the measure would have the effect of about tripling current sanctions related to Venezuela, a Peruvian government source said, speaking on condition of anonymity. The executive order stopped short, however, of a full U.S. trade embargo of the kind imposed on Cuba, experts said, by excluding Venezuela's still sizable private sector. The order maintains some exemptions for companies that do business with state oil company PDVSA. and licenses published on Tuesday reiterated that companies like Chevron and Halliburton can continue to do business with the PDVSA in Venezuela through October 25th. Some experts said that the move could lead to pushback from other countries and would require a lot of time and money to prove foreign companies are undermining sanctions. How much is the U.S. government willing to spend in diplomatic capital and economic costs in the United States in order to further its Venezuela policy, said David Murray of the Washington-based firm Financial Integrity Network, an expert on sanctions compliance. Russia, economic terror. Most Western Latin American democracies accused Maduro of rigging elections last year and are calling for him to step down so the country can hold a fresh presidential ballot. The summit, organized by Peru, a regional leader on demanding democratic reforms in Venezuela, had aimed to build support for new elections with Maduro's allies. Yet Russia, China, Cuba, Turkey, Bolivia, and Iran all boycotted the summit. Russia's foreign ministry said on Tuesday that Washington's asset freeze was illegal and amounted to economic terror, the RIA news agency reported. The order also could inflame the U.S.-China trade war if it hits Beijing hard with Venezuela owing China oil deliveries as repayment for loans through 2021, said Fernando Cutts, a former top aide to Trump on the National Security Council. Bolton warned Russia against doubling down on its support for Caracas and urged China to recognize opposition leader Juan Guaido as the country's legitimate leader, if it wanted to recoup debt owed by Caracas, since a new government in Venezuela might not want to honor agreements made with countries that helped Maduro hang on to power. Bolton said Washington had taken steps to ensure the sanctions did not hurt Guaido and his allies, nor prevent access to humanitarian goods. Now, see, the thing is, sometimes perception is reality. And even if it's not actually true, if someone perceives the United States' actions as economic terror, well, the thing about bullying is that there comes a time when the person being bullied eventually decides to fight back. And that now may be that time. And Venezuela probably couldn't do us much harm. But in terms of trade benefits and consequences of harassment, it may in fact be that Venezuela will appeal to the rest of the world and may result in America becoming hated. Much of Trump's maximum pressure campaign could eventually result in that very thing. People are already getting sick of him. But I respect Bolton in that he's stated quite simply that he doesn't want the sanctions to get in the way of humanitarian aid, or get in the way of possibly having a positive future for Venezuela. They're trying to manage this whole maximum pressure thing in a way that doesn't cause a nation to collapse, just cause extreme stress until they comply with the United States demands, which is still harassment on an international level. Absolutely. To finish off this article, Trump's Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross also spoke to the Lima summit, promising U.S. support and cooperation to help Venezuela rebuild its oil sector, institutions, and economy once Maduro leaves office, without giving details. The plan has a goal of reversing Venezuela's decline in oil production within a year, and calls for a long-term deal with the International Monetary Fund. But yeah, this is just another case of Trumpenomics. Pressure everyone into doing what you want and raise money through an odd mix of Keynesian economics and awkward trade deals with people who hate you. I mean, it's really becoming very clear to me why he defaulted on loans and literally went bankrupt 4 times. I do not want this man in charge of our economy anymore. I simply do not. And if you do, then as far as I'm concerned, you're crazy. Anyway.